SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.
MidDays with Gerard Gibert is on the air. MidDays with Gerard Gibert is powered by C-Spire. Power your home or business with C-Spire Fiber. To learn more, visit supertalk.fm/C-Spire. C-Spire Fiber powers SuperTalk Mississippi. Get ready to go beyond the headlines and join a meaningful conversation with people from around the state. You're listening to MidDays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to MidDays, SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm your host, Gerard Gibert, along with Will East in the Element Wealth Studio, guiding you through the middle of your day with facts, fodder, and fine music, as Rhino would say on this hot day. Well, you know what's coming up here this weekend, Will? A bunch of weather.
Snowpocalypse 2026.
Man.
I saw this morning where Nashville, Tennessee is expected to get, brace yourself, 30 inches
No way.
of snow. That's what they said this morning.
Jeez. That's going to cause a bunch of big old problems. And here in the Magnolia State, they're calling for a bunch of snow, ice, and other bad stuff. The line seems, as it always is, like parallels I-20. Like, what's up with that? So everything north of that doesn't look real good as far as winter storm situation is concerned. Below that, it's 50-50, really, just looking at the forecast. So don't know exactly what that means to those of us here in central Mississippi. Could just be rain, could be some freezing rain.
Yep.
Some ice, some sleet. I know it causes problems, but my understanding is you probably also heard that all the folks that work in the power industry are all positioned, ready to be deployed, expecting there to be widespread power outages. So transmission lines down. You know, I wondered, Will, the effect of all the dead pine trees all over the place from the drought. So that are still standing, and you would think they're sort of barely standing, but meaning they could fall with some weight on them from the storm. I look at the Natchez Trace around here. I do travel a little bit going east and west from where I live to where I go to church and so forth in Madison. And you can clearly see in the tree line off of the road itself a whole bunch of just dead pine trees. I mean, it'd be an expensive undertaking to go take all those out.
And those of us old enough to remember, I'm from North Mississippi, and I remember the ice storm of 94.
Yeah.
I can remember our power was out for about a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that. We had a wood stove, and so we were fine. We could cook on it and all that kind of stuff. It was like going back in time. But I remember listening, because it was dead silent at night. At night, you would hear, and sometimes during the day, you would hear trees popping.
Yeah.
That was them breaking from the weight of the ice. I just remember tree branches just falling left and right, and you could hear them cracking and popping. Looking at extreme North Mississippi, South Haven. Rain, snow, sleet, ice, all that fun stuff.
Man.
And then let's look at Monday's temperature for South Haven, Mississippi.
Okay.
High of 25. You want to guess the low?
Single digits?
8.
Oh, my gosh. When's the last time we had that? It's been a while.
It's been a while since we got down to single digits.
And just thinking about this drought, how that could be a factor. I don't know that we've had a major winter storm, have we, since the drought? And now I'm losing track of time. Was that 23? I think when we experienced a severe drought that killed all the pine trees, among a lot of other vegetation. It was hot and dry. And
floods in 20.
Okay,
remember
right.
January,
yep.
We had all the terrible floods.
Right,
and then,
when the governor had been elected, had to deal with that.
And then maybe it was 23 where we had the bad drought.
I think it was some in 22, but really bad in 23. Sort of normal last year. I don't remember having any prolonged periods without rain. But nonetheless, that had a major impact on the trees and vegetation in our state. And in particular, thinking about these pine trees that seem to be so vulnerable anyhow, just because of the nature of the tree itself, the configuration of the tree with its branches, and even in the dormant months still have a lot of needles on them, and those accumulate, of course, the ice and so forth. It weighs them down, and branches fall, and that, boom, there goes the power. So now I will give it to the I'm not sure who all's involved in this. I know the power companies are, and I think some state and local organizations as well that have been out trimming the trees. You see that all the time, right, during the summer months in particular, just to kind of prepare for this possibility. Mm-hmm. But I get worried about all these dead pine trees all over the place that are certainly very vulnerable and subject to come crashing down right on a power line, and that would not be cool with respect to keeping the lights on. I think that's kind of where we're headed here. And honestly, the entire country, right, is poised, from what I'm seeing, to experience a catastrophic winter storm. Historic is what some of the news outlets are calling it, that we should prepare for an historic catastrophic winter storm.
And it must be national news. Our friend Scott Sands, who's filled in a bunch, who lives in Toledo, Ohio, which normally gets a lot of winter weather, he was texting me last night. He goes, "I'll think warm thoughts for you." Now, when the guy from Ohio is sending you a message saying to stay warm.
Yep. So,
and we're just not – the power companies do an excellent job. You see them kind of prepared beforehand, but as a whole, the South is just not really built for this type of wintry weather. I was in Washington, D.C. one time when they had a bad snowstorm, and you had snow plows out on the streets ready to go, and we just don't have all that stuff.
We're not prepared for it, and we really shouldn't be. Spend a lot of money on it because it doesn't happen.
It
very
rarely happens.
Yeah. So we just have to deal with it when it does. But I think you could probably expect a run on the grocery stores, as we were talking about yesterday, and that's probably going to happen. And is that overkill? Who knows? All I know is it looks like from 20 north, it could get pretty dicey, and up south, maybe just some rain. But who knows at this point? And all the weather folks are saying, as we get within the 48-hour window, we'll be able to provide a more accurate forecast. We got Stephen Skoltedi on today at 10:35. He, of course, from Ole Miss. He is the chair of philosophy and religion and director of the Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom. We're going to get an update from him, of course, on the Independence Center. But more importantly, Will, recent Gallup poll shows that 45% of young voters are independent, that have not seen fit to align with either party, major party. So that is the first time ever that there are more of this particular demographic who consider themselves independents versus the major parties. Now, related to that, Will, Senator Don Hartness talked about that a bit yesterday, but he's introduced legislation that would require closed primaries. Now, the primaries, of course, as you know, are run by the parties, but this would mean that we would have to register. When we register to vote, we would have to affiliate with a party. Now, I haven't dug into the legislation to see, but I suspect that means that if you're currently registered to vote, you'd have to go affiliate. Or you could choose to be an independent, in which case you would not be able to participate in a party's primaries or runoffs. You'd have to wait till the general election. Now, in Mississippi, we don't register by party. Numerous states do. And that's why it's fairly easy to do kind of campaign predictions, because you already know what the base of voters looks like, right? Based on their party affiliation, it's a matter of getting them to the polls to vote. That's why they say that the get out the vote effort is so critical. But this could be interesting here in the state of Mississippi. A lot of people believe that there are so-called crossovers, especially between primary and runoff. That you get people that say, you know, I'd rather have this person than that person in the runoff, so I'm not going to vote in the primary and I'm going to reserve my vote for a potential runoff. That has been attributed to some of the wins in elections in the past. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio. Stay with us.
The new year brings new...
This segment of Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by Covington County Hospital in Collins, where your health matters.
The talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
We're rolling. Hit it. Go. Play it.
Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio. So yesterday, Will, of course, we reported the big-time sell-off up on Wall and Broad, and that was in response to the president's announcement that he may impose some fairly hefty tariffs on those nations in the EU that don't go along with his plans to acquire Greenland. And today, no surprise, the markets have reacted in a positive way. Dow up now 429, the NASDAQ about 250. And that's because this morning the president said, he's speaking, by the way, right now at the World Economic Forum, and he says that U.S. will not use force to acquire Greenland. And the market's like that, feeling like that maybe he's kind of softening his posture a bit. And that's important. Now, surprisingly, and yesterday, this is what really rattled the markets, because the markets hate uncertainty. And yesterday, he said, the negotiator, you'll have to find out, is what he said. And that's like the worst thing you could tell investors, how far he'll go to get Greenland. And, man, they said, oh, sell, right? So that, again, that truly rattled the markets. Now, interestingly enough, the Greenland, I believe it's the president, I think that's the head person, said that the people of Greenland should be prepared for anything, including an American invasion. Wow. So that, of course, is super geopolitical strife that is a huge factor in influencing markets. That would be a tough one. So, doesn't look like that's going to happen, and that triggered a global sell-off. The combination of the president saying, hey, we don't know how far we'll go, and then you got Greenland and Denmark saying, hey, get ready for an invasion here. This might happen. And then today, just a few moments ago, the president said, yeah, we're not going to use force here. So it appears that the Europeans want to talk to our trade envoy about a possible deal. That's usually what happens. And also it appears that the European nations want to have a conversation with the president and his advisors on what can happen here, what they can do to work this situation out. The president insists that Greenland is of critical strategic importance to this country. And it says it's the Golden Dome plan to defend and protect our nation from adversarial military threats requires Greenland because of where it's positioned. So it's kind of weird, isn't it, Will? You got this giant island of rock and ice. It's got, we looked it up Monday, right? 56,000 people inhabiting it, and it just happens to be positioned on God's green earth where it's of strategic value, such enormous strategic value. Plus, they got a lot of rare minerals as well, which is weird, and those are critical to industry and our military as well. So the investors looked at that, and it was called Sell America Trade yesterday. Sell America Trade. And the other thing is that caused bond markets to go haywire, and the 10-year Treasury spiked. It's down a bit today. Why is that important? Because that's what's tied to mortgage rates. And so mortgages, after the president announced a couple of weeks ago, mortgage interest rates did come down and broke through the 6% mark down to 5.99. And that's when the president announced that he had instructed Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae to sell $200 billion worth of mortgage bonds. What does that mean? It's just more cash out there available to fund mortgages, for loaning money for mortgages. And when you got an excess like that, yeah, that drives rates down. That was the idea, those organizations sitting on a bunch of money. And the president felt like that was a good way to put it to work to address the affordability issue in the country. So it didn't really cause interest rates to fall by too much, like 15 basis points, which isn't squat at the end of the day. That is less than a quarter point. But it's a start, certainly, and that we would blow through that in a couple of months. So it's not a permanent solution. The other big proposal that the president announced with respect to addressing the housing market, which is just top of mind in the nation's economy and I think among Americans in general. This is an interesting one, Will. The ability to tap one's 401k account for a down payment without suffering tax consequences. If you do that today, you can certainly go pull money out of your 401k account, but you're going to pay taxes on that immediately because it was deposited tax-free. That's the idea. Incentivize the savings and investment in 401k, put money away tax-free, but when you take it out, you pay taxes. Well, under this proposal, you would be able to do that for a down payment on a home without paying taxes on that withdrawal. That's a proposal. Now, I like that from the perspective of helping out homebuyers. But I get concerned that, you're kind of mortgaging your future here. You're going to dump that cash into an illiquid fixed asset, your home, and when you get ready to retire, you may not have been able to make up that amount of money. It just depends on every case, every situation's different based on your age, the amount in your account, the amount you feel like you need to retire with. So it could create a situation where you got to work longer than you intended to. You don't have as much money as you need for retirement. You have to sell your house when you get to that point to raise some money for that purpose. But I'm always in favor of something that reduces taxes and tax consequences for sure. But that's an interesting take. And then the other of his three proposals to address housing affordability is to bar institutional investors from buying single-family homes. That actually, I think, is overblown in my view. It's about 2% of the total market. Now, in some markets, it's more than that. Some markets, it's less. But overall in the country, it's about 2%. Now, this would not, in reading further a will into these proposals, it would not prohibit these institutions from investing in developments, housing developments, single-family housing developments that are designed to ultimately be rental housing. Okay, so it wouldn't ban that. Think about an institutional investor has their eye on a big piece of land, and they want to go buy that land and build a bunch of houses to rent them. So they're not really interfering that way, it's thought, with the single-family housing market where buyers are looking to buy houses, acquire, own houses, as opposed to rent them. In fact, it's thought that if we don't allow these institutional investors to do that, that actually puts more pressure on the housing market because there are just less places to live. And these guys see that it's a good investment to build these houses and rent them. Now, they get the benefit, by the way, for rental property of depreciating those properties as a deduction on their taxes because it's a business at that point, not personal. I've often thought, and I've heard some folks in Washington even discuss this, maybe we ought to let people deduct the depreciation on their house, right, as a deduction, the depreciation. There'd be some rules around how that would be calculated. Here's the downside of that. When you're depreciating property for tax purposes like that, that means you're reducing your what's called basis in it. So when you do sell it, then you have a bigger gain because instead of selling it at some point in the future and calculating the gain based on what you paid for it, now it's what you paid for it, less depreciation that's on the other side of that calculation. That increases your gain. That could be addressed by exempting the gain, which is also a proposal, up to more than $500,000. Right now it's up to $500,000. The proposal would allow the gain on the sale of a principal residence to be exempt from taxes as long as the sale is to a first-time home buyer. It just gets wonky, and I apologize for that, but I'm just telling you guys what's coming out of the White House. That's exactly what's coming out of the White House. Could affect us all. Again, the goal is to try to improve the state of the housing market and make houses more affordable, especially the first-time home buyers. Coming up next, Stephen Scoltetti at Ole Miss. He'll talk about the Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom and how more young folks are becoming political independents. Stay with us.
And at SuperTalk.fm. Middays with Gerard Gibert on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. Appreciate you joining us today. We welcome now Stephen Scoltetti, Professor of Philosophy, Chair of Philosophy and Religion at the University of Mississippi, and Director of the Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom. Professor, good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and Happy New Year, Gerard.
Yeah, it's been since last year that we last talked. Happy New Year to you. Hope things are going well. You guys reconvened in class now? Everybody's back?
We are. Yesterday was the first day of classes.
Okay.
So we've got all the students here, and everyone's just going to that first class, looking at the syllabus for the first time and kind of getting their marching orders.
Yeah, now we got ice storm coming through just as they get back into class, man. Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
It never fails. It never fails. We'll see. Well, it is funny, though, now with the ability to Zoom and, when an ice storm comes, we have lots of ways to kind of prepare for it ahead of time and still go ahead and give students a lot of content, even if they can't make it into campus.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly changed quite a bit. So, first, give us an update from the Declaration of Independence Center. How's it been going? Anything new we need to know about?
Yeah, well, first, every time I'm on your show, I kick myself afterward for not just mentioning and encouraging people to go and really sign up for our social media. We really are doing now a better job of just showing people all the great things we're doing. So we regularly post on X. We have a very lively Instagram account as well as a Facebook account. And so, it's one thing to hear me describe it with just words. I think it's also exciting when people can really see the pictures and videos and just get a sense of all the things that we're doing.
Yeah.
But with the beginning of spring semester here, we're offering a bunch of great classes. Every semester we offer our Freedom Studies 101, Ideals of Liberty in the U.S. Founding, which is kind of our introduction to how to think about liberty in the American tradition. We offer a number of upper division classes this semester, one on freedom and economics, which we always are excited to teach and always gets a large number of students in that. We're offering a class on the political philosophy of the Bible, and that class is full because there's so much interest in it. And I'm sure that's just going to be a rewarding and memorable experience for all the students in there. And then finally, a class looking at the relationship between liberty and empire. So lots of interesting topical things for students to ponder and think through. And the guy we have teaching that class is sort of an expert in the history of foreign policy. So he, just to give you an example, he wrote his dissertation on the foreign policy of Benjamin Franklin. So he has this kind of big picture, forest level understanding of kind of what it means for a free country to interact on a global stage. And I think it's just great for students to be able to think through those issues.
Oh, absolutely. And any time you can get students to have to ponder and think about things rather than just sort of read and memorize things, I think you're helping them out in their education, because that's what you have to do when you're in the private sector or whatever industry you choose, your professional life, shall we say. It will consist of that.
And that's especially true in a world with artificial intelligence, let alone great YouTube videos and everything. I mean, students can sit down at their computer and have a lot of great information thrown at them, and they can absorb a lot of things online. And I think that's exciting. I know a lot of people are kind of threatened by it. I think it's kind of a wonderful thing. There's so many opportunities for students to learn. However, the one thing that you can't do when you're just receiving information like that is be in a face-to-face discussion with another person who's questioning what you're saying, who's asking you to defend your view, who takes the conversation in an unexpected way that sort of doesn't follow a script or doesn't follow the kinds of things other people are saying out there. And in all of our classes, I think that's still sort of a magical part of what we do in education, is to get students to not just be passive recipients of information, but we teach them to flex those muscles to be active thinkers and critical thinkers.
Yeah.
And, really trying to understand the arguments behind the sloganeering.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully when they form an opinion that they have some rationale or support for that opinion. I found that if you're trying to persuade someone to an idea, to a concept, to your viewpoint, that you do a lot better when you got something, well, that's just how I feel about it, that you've got some support, right, that you've thought through it, and you've got several inputs that guided you in making that decision.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely the case. And I think once people have an opportunity to be in a space where they really can flex those intellectual muscles, I think they kind of are amazed at what an incredible experience that is to be able to defend your views and not just stand there and kind of shout at someone or just say kind of things like, well, that's what I believe.
Yeah.
And that's the end of the conversation. It's just to really be in a good conversation with someone who even disagrees with you is really an amazing experience.
Agree. Absolutely. Okay, so there was a recent Gallup poll we wanted to talk to you about. I just talked about on the show in the prior segment that 45% of the young voters in this country have described themselves as independents and are not affiliating with one of the major parties. What's going on here, Professor?
Oh, well, Here's my theory about it, just based on my experience with students. I think students are more, let's call it, principled in many ways about their overarching views about the world. I mean, the conservative students that I work with really are working out a set of conservative principles that they're trying to live by and that they're interpreting the world with. And I think the same goes for students who are progressive or social democrat. I mean, I think students, just because of the amount of information out there and the number of podcasts that are out there and the number of things you can explore, I do think intellectual students are able to kind of refine their philosophical and ideological views now in a way that allows them to really have a framework. All right? So then when they have this sort of philosophical framework, and then they go and look at a party, a political party, a party is always a coalition of different interests, different views that are being cobbled together. And I think a lot of times students have their idealistic principles, and then they just see a big disjunction between those idealistic principles and then what they see offered by the actual parties and by the actual decisions made by the politicians. And so anyway, maybe that's a complicated way of just saying, they're still maturing.
Yeah.
And when they get older and wiser, they'll understand that parties are never going to live up to any pure ideals. Yeah. And a lot of life is like that. Yeah. But I do think part of it is just young people have an opportunity to kind of crystallize their philosophical views now in a way that makes them intensely aware when a politician or a party doesn't kind of fit that view. And so anyway, maybe that's too optimistic, but I mean, the students I work with are just so incredible and inspiring that I usually try to take the optimistic interpretation first. Sure. And be proven otherwise. Well, that would be my theory of what's going on behind that poll.
Okay. Well, I hope what it means is that, and what it sort of conveys is that they are forming opinions and viewpoints and kind of have a body of philosophy, political philosophy. And they are looking at the platforms and the principles of the respective parties and saying, yeah, I don't align with that. I would feel better if that's the case, taking the optimistic viewpoint here, than, well, I just don't like those people, that person, so I'm not going to affiliate. That's the risk here, because it's all a lot about emotion and physical profile and all the other elements of that, right?
Oh, yeah. No, that's right. That's right. And, it really just is a very hard problem for any politician, to communicate all of your views on very complicated issues in just like a 5-second soundbite. Yes. That'll capture the imagination of someone who's going through their social medias. And that is just the world we live in. That's a major way in which people communicate. And what you want to do is, hopefully what we're doing is teaching students to, it's okay to get an initial impression, but don't stop with that. Yeah. Yeah. Dig deeper, explore different issues, look at the policymakers behind the slogan or the blurb. And we need to teach them how to get to the bottom of the things where they're just seeing the tip of the iceberg a lot of times.
We got a break right here. Can you hang around for another segment? We got a short segment on the other side, and get your thoughts on the current political landscape and how you're relating that in the classroom and how students sort of identify with that. You good?
Sure. Happy to.
Great. Professor Stephen Skoltedi, the professor of philosophy and religion at Ole Miss, is our guest. Stay with us.
At Fillmore Buick GM. It's so awesome! Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Come on, let's get on with the show!
On SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. Middays from the Element Wealth Studio. We're visiting with Professor Stephen Scoltetti from Ole Miss. So, Professor, before we went to break, we were just wrapping up talking about the number of young folks that now identify as independents. I believe that the 45% mark actually exceeds the number of those who identify with either of the other major parties. And so this is somewhat of a ground shift there for sure. But what we're seeing are some, we've been talking about here on the show, strange bedfellows, as they say, being made in our politics, both here in the state and at the federal level, where we're seeing, for example, the president and one of his strongest adversaries, Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, are actually in agreement on a fairly major policy issue, and that's capping credit card interest rates, as an example. And then we're seeing here in the state, Republicans and Democrats align in their opposition of education freedom. And that's fracturing certainly the Republican Party to a great extent, but I can't remember in recent memory when we had this sort of overlap, crossover conflict. Is this something you guys are talking about in the classroom, how this is just, part of the political world?
Definitely. And every time we get away from that, students will come up to you after class and say, hey, could we talk about this issue in class next time? Because me and all my friends are talking about this and wondering what you think and what everyone else thinks. And so students are very interested in trying to make sense of all of these different coalitions and surprising positions and trying to just come to grips with sort of the unexpected. But also, it's not just that. Also, students are curious about asking some basic questions about, well, where did we come up with some big thing that the United States has been doing for whatever, 30, 40 years?
Yeah.
I think that's, I don't want to weigh in on the pros and cons of any particular Trump policy, obviously, but I will say just the thing that everyone will remember Trump for, I think, love him, hate him, whatever, he really has forced a lot of people just to revisit a lot of assumptions and just the way sort of settled agreements and settled arrangements by just asking really blunt and basic questions. For example, like what should NATO be doing?
Sure. Yeah, the status quo and I think tradition, as we used to say in the IT world. Why do you do it that way? Oh, it's just a tradition. Well, okay, but what's the underlying purpose and how does that benefit the organization? I agree, and the president has disrupted that typical practice.
That's right. And, as you know deeply, Gerard, in the business world, there's this idea of kind of creative destruction, right? I mean, some upstart company will come along with a great new innovation, a new way of doing business, a new product, and it'll really shake up the market. And by shake up the market, we mean some really hardcore things. I mean, we mean some businesses are going to go out of business. People are going to lose their jobs. Just the comfortable and settled way business was being done gets destroyed, and because of some new upstart that forces everyone to rethink and redo everything. And in some ways, Trump is doing the equivalent in politics. I think. And again, whether that innovation ends up being for good or ill, I mean, people can debate that. But he really is kind of. There's a lot of people who might lose their political careers and their settled way of doing things just because everything gets shaken up because of his entrance into politics.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think from the president's perspective, that's largely because he didn't spend a career in politics. And I think when you do, you tend to get to a point where we're not even going to try that because I've been here a long time and that just doesn't have a chance. And he looks at things and says, well, Yeah, we ought to take a look at that. And you're right. He spurs the conversation is what he does, and he gets people talking about it. You're right. Regardless of what you think about the policy, the conversation gets kicked off.
Right. Well, I mean, I was just thinking the other day about, suppose he did want to, change the U.S. stance toward Greenland, but had done it sort of in the traditional way, where sort of in an elite way with the elite diplomats and behind-the-scenes negotiations, they work out some kind of new way of doing things. How much conversation do you think we'd be having about that? Or how many lines in the newspapers would that be getting? I mean, maybe for really technical people,
we wouldn't know.
Page 21,
we wouldn't know.
It'd be on page 21 in a little blip. Whereas,
100%
or not, I mean.
Middays with Gerard Gibert is brought to you by the Mississippi Business Journal. Visit msbusinessjournal.com. Scott Coopwood, publisher and president.
And now, another hour of the talk that keeps Mississippi talking. Middays with Gerard Gibert.
Begin your transmission now.
Now on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's hour 2 of Middays from the Element Wealth Studio on this hump day. That's right. And the big storm is brewing, waiting to flow through the state of Mississippi. We appreciate the professor for coming on. Had a little technical glitch at the end, so we may have stopped rather abruptly. But he wanted to remind everybody to check out the Declaration of Independence Center for the Study of American Freedom's various social media accounts and sign on for those. That's got to be great work. I mean, it seems to me if I were a professor, that'd be a lot of fun to just have these kind of open discussions with students and let them share their thoughts and ideas and views and consume those of others and have civil discourse, do so in a respectful way. That just seems like that'd be more fun, I believe, than just kind of a one-way flow of content, in the classroom. I get it. That's necessary.
Yeah, he said that they're not quite jaded yet, politicians.
Exactly. But this is something to pay attention to, the fact that 45% of the young folks in this country have decided that they are independents, that they don't find congruence with either of the major parties. And it's hard to tell, what is the rationale for that, what supports that high percentage in what these young people are thinking without talking to them directly. How'd you come to that conclusion? I think as we get older, we get a little set in our ways, and we tend to stay that way for the duration once we've kind of crossed over one way or another, I guess, even politically. Certainly some people change their minds and kind of have an epiphany one way or another. But it's related, I would say, to a great extent to this legislation that has been filed by Senator Don Harkness that would require closed primaries. Now, there's some people that want open primaries. That is the case in some states where everybody runs against everybody else and the top two advance to a runoff if necessary. And that avoids, if you will, the process we have in Mississippi where we have primaries. There are runoffs if necessary, if no one gets 50% plus one of the total votes. Then shortly thereafter, the top two candidates advance to a runoff. One of those is going to win, and then they would take on the candidate from the other party, or it could be an independent in the general election. So in an open primary scenario, everybody runs against everybody else, and the top two go to a runoff if necessary, and boom, that's it. The election is over, and the winner is declared. So you got different points of view, and by the way, these points of view are from people who share the same party affiliation. So just another example of some misalignment, and that's fine. It's nothing says you've got to align with everything 100%, right, to be part of this party. It does kind of bring up to me, Will, this rather pejorative term that I don't know when it was coined, rhino in the Republican side, the RINO, Republican in name only. So what qualifies one to be a rhino? Does that mean you're not 100% aligned with the published party platform? What is that? Sometimes it's just opinion, that people have of people, and they will say, they're just a rhino. Maybe it means you vote with Democrats. So does that mean the 17 Republicans in the Mississippi House that just voted against school choice joining every Democrat, are they rhinos? They probably wouldn't be happy if they were described as such, and the Republican Party clearly has education freedom listed among its party platform. So if you vote against that, or you see where I'm going with this, and how
do they have dinos, Democrats in
I don't know.
name only? I've never heard that. Maybe we can invent that term.
I don't know, but you see how it almost makes it look silly a little bit, because there is no so-called purity or purity test.
No two humans
agree
on everything 100% of the time.
That's the way they made us. So now we got people in Mississippi that are Republicans that are upset about the governor opting in to the Trump scholarship program. All that really is a tax credit for those who contribute up to $1,700 to what's called a scholarship granting organization, SGO.
So if your kid goes to private school,
and
you pay, I don't know, $5,000 a year, let's say.
I know where you're going, and that's not what this is.
That's not what that is.
Not what it is. And that's what's so confusing, because that's what a lot of people think it is, okay?
Okay.
So it's not. This would be for a person. I'll use me as an example. My kids are obviously grown, but I want to help others, okay? Students that would like to get out of a public school situation and attend a private school. Or perhaps they're in a private school and it's really hurting their family financially. It's a stretch financially. I could contribute $1,700 to an organization, not the school, a third-party organization known as a scholarship granting organization. I can get a full $1,700 tax credit, federal tax credit, not state, federal tax credit. In other words, the government's going to reimburse me for making that contribution to that SGO. It's the SGO, in accordance with the rules that have yet to be published, okay, that have to conform with federal law, and then the state would create rules around these scholarship granting organizations. They then would administer the program, and they would allocate those scholarships, which are funded by third parties such as myself, that gave them $1,700. So this is not if you are paying tuition for your child to go to private school that you can get a federal tax credit.
I think that's a lot of the reaction.
Right. It's not what it is. It's absolutely 100% not what it is. This is an incentive for those who want to help others. Now, you could, as a parent of a child and a taxpayer of a child in a private school, you could give $1,700 to an SGO, but that doesn't help you. It allows the SGO then to take that money and dole out scholarships to other people. Your child could apply for one, but they would be granted that in accordance with the rules that applies to everybody that's applying. You see where I'm going?
Yep.
That's where all the confusion is. And unfortunately, as you know, people latch on to a narrative. It gets all over social media. Even I've seen members of our legislature have misrepresented this. Okay? It's not what it is. It's not how it works. It's more akin to the Children's Promise Act, we have in the state of Mississippi. A lot of people are familiar with that. There are a number of organizations, they're nonprofits, to whom taxpayers and even corporations, businesses, can contribute to those organizations and get a dollar-for-dollar credit. You give them $1,000, you get a credit, an offset of your state income or property taxes for your contribution. So it's not helping your family directly. It's an incentive to get people to contribute to these organizations. One that I've talked about, we've interviewed folks, John Damon, the CEO of Canopy, is a prime example. Canopy Children's Solutions. And you can give money to Canopy under the Children's Promise Act of the state of Mississippi, and they provide you with a receipt for your contribution, and you supply that to the Department of Revenue, and they approve it. And when you do your tax return, your Mississippi tax return, you're able to take that credit off your Mississippi taxes, dollar for dollar. Okay? This is similar in that, except it's federal. And it's you give $1,700 to a third-party organization, up to $1,700. You take a credit against your federal income taxes. The third-party organization receives all these applications for scholarships, literally what it's called, but through some methodology that will be prescribed by the rules coming from the White House and the governor's office. That organization, that third party, grants those scholarships to the people who apply for them. It's some amount. The federal law says their household income to qualify cannot exceed 300% of the median income in their area of the state. So a lot of folks that have kids in private school, for example, to the scenario you described that a lot of people think, wouldn't even qualify based on their income. See where I'm going there? Yeah, everything's complicated. I'm sorry. But that's the best explanation I can give. We're coming right back in the Element Wealth studio.
We interrupt this program.
Gerard Gibert.
Here we go. This is huge. Huge news. Huge news. Huge. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone, from the Element Wealth studio. So Will was just saying, man, you see this stuff get on Facebook, for example, and it just gets lit up like wildfire. And unfortunately, I think we've become accustomed in our society, first, to just how readily available just information is. Not necessarily accurate information, but just information. You just a couple of clicks on your phone, right?
Information and then instant reaction.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And most people are not going to invest the time to really dig into that at a detailed level. Honestly, I try to on the show to cut through because usually when you see the stuff, say, yeah, that doesn't really sound right. I mean, you got to be skeptical, right? And I think I can honestly say that's one thing. Being in the IT business sort of helped me with that sort of curious nature, because it's always something new. Mm-hmm. And every day, not like an annual change, to a model as you have in some industries, but it's every day. It's just a downpour of new technology, new concepts, new consumption models. But when something would be kind of represented as a certain way, it just always made sense to just look underneath the covers and try to figure that out. And so many things would happen, and in business this happens a lot. And folks will contend certain things. Even customers Oh, yeah, they came by and it hadn't worked. I used to hear this all the time. Ever since they left, it's never worked. Like, never worked? Like, does it do anything? You call us 2 weeks later? I don't think that's exactly right, you know. Well, yeah, you see, when I hit this key right here, this does. Okay, well, that's a little different than nothing works. And you got to manage that, you know, and work through that. I get it, and that maybe is a poor analogy, but it's the best one I can give with my background and experience. But this is a case where somebody will throw something out there, as you said, and it gets shared umpteen times, and people have absolutely taken it to the bank. And it's just the gospel.
I'll give you an example. The income tax thing they passed last year.
The federal or state?
The state one.
Okay.
Eliminating the income. There was so much misinformation about that.
Completely right. I agree.
I get into, not arguments, but discussions with friends, not strangers, with friends who didn't understand the deal. And I was just like, that's wrong. And I would provide the link, to the SuperTalk article, and I would say, this is where it says it.
Yeah.
And they would, no, that's not what I heard.
The good news is we have lots of great tools that allow us to produce information and distribute information. There's no question that's changed our world for the better. The bad news is it's just as easy to propagate erroneous information as it is factual information.
Yeah.
That's the problem. And because it comes in this sort of formal format on your screen, all nice typewritten, well-crafted language, as opposed to somebody handing you a handwritten note, you say, no, I don't know about that. But because of this, oh, yeah, that's absolutely got to be true. And there's just the whole school choice debate has really exposed that a lot. The tax deal, you're right, did as well. And then with respect to, just again, back to what started this conversation, the governor signing off on the $1,700 tax credit available at the federal level, not the state level. And as we pointed out yesterday, when the bill was passed in July that included this provision, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we talked to both the lieutenant governor and the Speaker of the House to just gauge their interest, and they were both in support of it. Now, it turns out that, you remember this, so right after it passed, well, there was some thinking there that, hey, this looks like that states could opt into this at the executive level because it's federal and doesn't affect the state tax laws and so forth, wouldn't require legislative approval. And so our governor leveraged that opportunity. I think 18 states now have opted in. No surprise, mostly red states. Now, I think that's a disservice to the citizens of the blue states and that they're not opting in. And, of course, this bothers people in Mississippi, generally speaking, the same ones who oppose school choice, because they see this as another tool that people in Mississippi would use to exit the public schools and enroll in a private school. So, and again, don't get the $1,700. This is the other confused part, Will, and I know you've seen this. Don't get that dollar figure confused with tuition, because it's a $1,700 credit available up to the donor who provides a contribution, makes a contribution to the scholarship granting organization. They just got a big fund full of all that money, and then they dole out the scholarships in whatever amount they deem appropriate that they select to the applicants in accordance with whatever the rules are going to look like. The one big rule is you can't have a household income greater than 300% of the median in your area. In this case, area, we're talking about the areas of our state. So the state median household income, I know I mentioned that yesterday, I believe, $59,000. Mm-hmm. That simply means half or below that, half or above. That's statewide. So that varies from region to region, but not by a lot necessarily. Depends on the boundaries and the borders of a region. So that's totally separate than tuition. That whatever that amount that is awarded by the scholarship granting organization may be more or less than the tuition for the particular private school that the student receiving the award enrolls in or is enrolled in. And that's the way that works. But the concern, of course, by the opponents is, well, that's going to provide more financial opportunity for those currently in the public schools to exit the public school and enroll in a private school because somebody else is paying the fare. And now, what they can argue is this, Will. They're not, in this case, siphoning state money away from the public school and diverting it to the private school? Not whatsoever. What they're siphoning is private contributions. Now, you could say they're siphoning federal public money, right? Not from the public school, but just from the federal treasury. And that made me start to think about something last night, Will, what is public money? Because, that's the argument, right? Oh, we can't possibly let public funds be transferred to private schools. How does money, does it like mark, or the bills mark, like public, private? What the heck is public money? Where does all money start? It don't start with government. Government doesn't create squat. They collect, they confiscate, but they don't produce. Now, you could argue that there's some government programs that produce and you pay fees for those. Okay, I'll acknowledge that. But in general, it's the private sector, it's private companies, it's private individuals that produce value for society. They get compensated for that based on decisions made by consumers at both the corporate and individual level. And some of that compensation, they got to send to government. I guess at that point, it's deemed public. Like, does it go through some transition process? Is it like a transgender sort of thing? We have a trans currency? Trans currency from private to public? And I'm not trying to make a mockery of it. I'm just trying to point out that, and I get what they're saying, that, think about that for a minute. That is almost a little ridiculous in its argument, its basis. So it's public money. Well, it hadn't always been that. That's more consistent with the Democrat philosophy that we give you a tax break. We let you keep your money. That's because we're charitable. We're generous. That money starts with us. We're the rightful owner of it in government. And whatever you get to keep, you just ought to be grateful for that. That's what it reminds me of here. Yeah. We're going to take a break right here in the Element Well studio. We got Dr. Craig Ogeron coming up at 12:05. Looking forward to that. Known Craig for a long time. He's the executive director of the Mississippi Department of Information Technology Services. He's the chief information officer of the state as well. We're going to talk what's going on at ITS and artificial intelligence. Stay with us.
From the Seabrook,
Gerard Gibert.
He keeps his classified documents right where they belong.
Inside a Journey record jacket from the 1980s.
Gerard Gibert, SuperTalk Mississippi.
A Monday warrior, mean stride. Today's Tom Sawyer, mean pride.
Welcome back, everyone. So, KC down in Ocean Springs makes a good point. said, did the governor opting us into the $1,700 credit program for scholarships, essentially? And it's because, as you know, Will, the governor, he is, but the president in particular is a big proponent of education freedom. And by the way, that's included in the Republican platform. So is it fair to say those who oppose it are inconsistent and in conflict with the Republican platform? Does that make them, and this is a word I never use and I hate it, rhino? So, which calls attention to how silly that is, in my view. So, okay, I get it. They just don't. I think in general, the good Republicans I know in our legislature, yeah, they align with the party's platform. This is one of those issues that at least 17 of them in the House disagree with. And I respect that. I get it. But the president likes it, and so he pushed through this, and the Congress acted, the Republicans, this $1,700 tax credit. And so Casey asked, well, did opting into that create also an equivalent credit for your state income tax? The answer is no. And this is something I brought up on the program. Some of the tax reforms, the goodies, if you will, actually virtually all of them, in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act at the federal level would do not apply, I should say, to your state income taxes, tips, overtime, automobile interest. We need law in the state of Mississippi to get those squared up, just like we had to pass law a couple of years ago to also square up and align the immediate expensing provisions. So, does not. And I hope that our legislature sees fit, and I've talked to many about it, but I haven't seen any bills yet, so I'm not sure why this is falling on deaf ears, that I believe we should align state tax code and state tax policy with federal tax policy along these lines. Tips, overtime, automobile interest. Now, keep in mind, here's the problem. All expires at the end of 28. So you'd have to have the bill set up in the state so that it also terminated and expired then as well. But good question. Appreciate that, Casey. Wayne in Batesville, we're talking about this bill that would require closed primaries in the state of Mississippi. Says, I'm an elections commissioner. If Senator Hartness really wants to do something good, he should introduce a bill to completely do away with party primaries. Every candidate runs out of the same gate, just like the Kentucky Derby. Top two runoff in November would save the state and counties millions each election cycle. And I think to your point, Wayne, in Batesville, that's why many states have adopted. I believe, Will, our neighbor to the west, Louisiana, has fully open primaries and votes on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken.
They got some weird ones over there.
Yeah. And then you got some that have this ranked choice voting stuff, which I'm not a fan of.
Alaska has that, right?
I think that's right, yeah. So, but I hear you, Wayne, and appreciate your feedback, especially as an elections commissioner. I've thought about that as well. I'm not totally opposed to that either, just having open primaries. But this closed primary thing that from some of the conservative groups in the state is a high priority. They also want to ban Sharia law. I don't know if that's a huge problem in the state. I think it would be more preemptive in nature. And I don't know why we have to ban law if we're already abide by our law. So I'm not really sure what that means. If people are practicing, I guess, the tenets of some Sharia law stuff, if that conflicts with American law, that's a problem. If that breaks, let's say, you know what I'm saying, if that violates American law, clearly that's a problem. But do we need more laws for that is the question. I don't know. That
may be one where, it's good to put on the campaign pamphlet.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, it is. There's no doubt. It's popular. So I don't know that I'd stand up and down in opposition to it. I'm just sort of questioning the need for it. And, look, I could be educated in that regard. I don't see it. And, again, I haven't just dove deeply into and tried to educate myself on Sharia law. I certainly see a lot of discussion about it. There are some things that look crazy and, like I said, look like they would violate our laws, our federal and state laws. Well, we don't need any more laws to say you can't violate federal and state laws. That's the only thing I'm saying. Yeah. I get worried when we just keep cranking laws out. I'm for less laws. And
Me too.
And I'm not for unnecessary laws. And so, again, somebody could persuade me that no, we need to do this, and I'm wide open to hearing about that. Yeah, talking about the markets, the VIX dropped. That's the volatility index dropped 13% this morning. That's after spiking yesterday. Yeah, it's just it's a roller coaster, no doubt about it. Ben from Madison says that he doesn't like the idea of closed primaries in Mississippi. He makes a good point. We already have very low turnouts, and Ben, that's a problem across the country. This would only worsen our turnout numbers. You're probably right. And then, Will, you get into complicated stuff, and I hadn't read the senator's bill and how this would be handled, where, okay, well, I affiliate with, one party today, but right before the election, I want to change my affiliation so I can vote in that one, but I'm going to change it back. So I don't know what the law prescribes there, but you'd have to have some rules around that. Otherwise, people would just hop around and just abuse it, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. So I get concerned about that. He said you'd also see, does Ben, more polarizing candidates on both sides. Frankly, I'm not sure if that is in the best interest of our state. It's something I think will get some discussion, and we will certainly see where all that goes. But I hear you. Let's see. On the C Spire text line, just talking about how crazy stuff is on social media. People just don't freak out on social today. For example, people are freaking out over the weather. And it's just raining, but stupidity sets in, and they think the snow and ice are starting today because they saw it online. Or I heard no one thinks for themselves. Yeah, I hear you. And it's a problem, and I don't think it's going away, right? So the best we can do is try to cut through the noise and cut through the untruths and try to unravel those and hopefully shine the light of truth and keep that going here. It's what we're going to do in this studio for sure, at a minimum. Mose says, for one, Sharia law violates women's rights. Well, that's what I understand as well, Mose. And if those are violating rights that are, again, provided through law and statute, well, that's a violation. That's a problem, and they need to be punished for that and suffer the consequences in accordance of our law. So KC says, if we don't have a state income tax, there would be no issue. Totally agree. And so it does mean that the reconciliation is, I know you came out of this industry, Casey, that the reconciliation process between state and federal taxes would be moot, right? We wouldn't need that anymore because there are no state income taxes. And the same is true for various incentives on the state income tax side. None of those apply when you don't have any state income tax. Now, of course, Will, lots of folks are calling attention to the property taxes in our state. And like I said yesterday, I'm a little just kind of puzzled by those who want more money for schools but don't want to pay property taxes, and a good part of the good portion of school revenue is derived from property taxes. In fact, if you look at your property tax bill, you'll see that it accounts for the greatest share of your ad valorem property taxes. It's schools, counties, cities. Overall funding for K through 12 schools is just under 50% from the state. 30+%, 32 or so, I think, last data I looked at, from local taxes, and then about a quarter from the federal government. The amount we receive per student from the federal government as a percentage of our total funding for schools, highest in the nation because it's based on income, state per capita income, and we, unfortunately, are 50th in that category. When I lived in Louisiana way back when, you figured your federal taxes and 10% of your federal tax was your state tax. Gee, I don't remember that. You could be right. I lived in Louisiana for about 3 years myself. I do recall having to do state tax returns, but I don't remember that. You may be right. New car tags in Sunflower County are more than my property taxes on a $250,000 house. Not surprised by that, but that's getting a lot of attention, our property taxes. I got to tell you, though, when you're eliminating the income tax, as we are in the state of Mississippi, The only revenue source we're going to have remaining once that's complete at the state level, for the most part, is sales taxes. And that then gets diverted out to the cities. It just makes it hard to make the economic ends meet, as the saying goes. Another segment in this hour. Stay with us.
Polyupa, Mississippi. Covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. We are in the Element Wealth studio. Go to myelementwealth.com or call 601-957-6006 to let Element Wealth help you find your balance between income growth and guarantees. The Dow now up 260. The president speaking right now. It's kind of fascinating. I'm watching him speak and watching the markets are kind of reacting to his words, of course, grasping on to every word that comes out of his mouth as the leader of the free world. And I think his message at the World Economic Forum is that America is driving the global economy. And I agree with him, and that's what our posture should be, I believe. And they may not like that. That's kind of a separate matter from the whole Greenland issue, which he seems to have relaxed somewhat his intentions there. I think he still wants to acquire the company, but at this point, he announced this morning no force will be used. Now, the NASDAQ was up over 200 points earlier in the session. It is now paired those gains, and it's now only up 50 points. So I just checked my big NASDAQ account, and it went from being in the green to the red on that news. I did catch a fascinating interview with Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, this morning. And he made it very clear that the demand for their chips, their computers, is exceeding their ability to meet such demand. And that corporate customers, data center customers, all the above, are buying what they're making at record levels. I do still expect that NVIDIA will be the first company in the history of the world to generate a $200 billion net income. I think that's coming. And it could be next year based on his outlook, his guidance. Now, this past year's last fiscal year, which ended late last year, the company generated about $125 billion of top-line revenue, but they threw off almost $90 billion of profit on that, which is mind-boggling when you look at their net profit percentage sitting at over 60%. Contrast that to Walmart, which is more like 3.5%. Kroger, 3.5%. The big insurance companies, they're also 3.5%, 4% net income organizations. So it's just incredible. I've never seen anything like it. A company that produces 65% roughly net operating income margin. Kevin from Bandon says HR 4335. One subject at a time is a bill me love thought of, and of course it didn't get passed. It cuts out hidden pork in the 2,000-page bills. I think a lot of people are of the opinion that they'd like to see one subject bills, legislative measures to eliminate cramming all this stuff in them that nobody reads and understands, honestly, comprehends, because there's just so many to filter through. Not a bad idea. I could be down for that. Also, talking about Professor Skoltedi, I just think he does a marvelous job for the university and for the state, and just kind of the departure that is from the normal classroom setting where students are engaged in really effective, open discussion about a wide range of policy, political, and historical topics related to the freedoms we enjoy and the formation and creation and build out of our country. I think that's excellent. I just think that'd be a lot more fun as a professor, certainly, than the traditional classroom practice. Says if you get time, ask if someone could audit one of his classes. Yeah, I will. I'll find out from him. I suspect you can. Well, I've never known them to turn anybody away at the university that just wants to sit in and audit a class and not really be an enrolled student where they're taking home a grade in the class. Not a bad idea. Paula Meridian says, so the insurance companies have a low profit margin, but it seems like every insurance salesman that I know is living in a gigantic house and making a huge salary. Doesn't that come off the gross? Yeah, I mean, the fact is, Paul, is sales occupations pay a lot. And that's what the market dictates, what the market requires. They are highly compensated. I'm just passing on to you that when you look at the bottom line of these companies, it's not as healthy as a lot of people think it is. I think they're shocked to find out, despite what you hear from all the folks at Washington, they're making these enormous profits. It's really not. Relatively speaking, less than NVIDIA in a quarter they make in a year. Coming right back with Dr. Craig Ogeron from Mississippi ITS. Stay with us.
And now, the talk that keeps Mississippi talking.
That's what I like to listen to.
You're listening to Middays with Gerard Gibert here on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Winter is here again, oh Lord. Haven't been home in a year, oh Lord. I hope she holds on a little longer.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays from the Element Wealth studio on this hump day, as Rhino would say. Will East filling in for Rhino today. We're pleased to welcome now Dr. Craig Ogeron, serves as the Executive Director of the Mississippi Department of Information Technology Services and also is the state's Chief Information Officer. And so, just so folks who know, we refer to that on an abbreviated basis as ITS and CIO. So,
yep. A bunch of letters.
You and I know all that, but of course, our industry is nothing but alphabet soup anyhow.
Sure.
So, glad that you could come in today.
You.
So, you and I have had the honor, the pleasure of serving on the state's Artificial Intelligence Task Force. That's something that our legislature saw fit to create in the last legislative cycle, because this stuff is coming at us like a freight train going downhill, and a lot of questions not only about how to, where to regulate the technology where it makes sense, but also as part of your role as the CIO, how to utilize it in state government and in industry as well. But before you dig into that, talk about exactly what ITS does. You and I know that well, but talk
right.
about what ITS does.
So the legislature created this in 1970 as the Central Data Processing Authority, and we started out as a consolidated mainframe shop, right? So UMC had a mainframe back in the day. Public Safety had a mainframe for driver's license, so that's how we started. Into the 80s, procurement was added in telecom, so networking, telephony, and sort of grew that way. And I would sort of argue that this next cusp, as you and I have talked about, this real paradigm shift is going to be, what do we do with AI for sure, but I actually also think cloud. I think the state is very premise-based, believe it or not, in 2026, so there's a large opportunity to scale and bring economies to computing for government from a cloud perspective.
Yeah, and as you know, the agencies are very independent, and they like their autonomy.
I do know that.
You know that quite well. We laugh about that because as a vendor, as my company was, working through ITS, because you guys oversee procurement and standards for the state as well, that sometimes there can be a little difference of opinion, shall we say, and that's perfectly fine. But the bottom line is a lot of the agencies still are operating in a premise environment, meaning they've got all the infrastructure and the software physically installed on their sites.
Yes.
And they probably ought to be taking a look at how they could probably somehow migrate that to cloud architecture.
Well, I think they'll have to, right? Because we live in a technology ecosystem where our partners, the companies that provide our partnerships, they're going to be optimizing decisions on their end of the business. Right?
Yeah, they'll drive it.
So to grow their business, they're going to say, we're going to partner with Microsoft, we're going to partner with AWS, and when they do that and turn to you, you may have a choice or two, but that's the next place where innovation is going to take place at scale.
Yeah.
I think the comment that really resonates with me is it's a who moved your cheese, right? There used to be inside of a data center that you owned and ran, you were able to bring economies of scale. You were able to say all of this being in one place is a good thing, and that has moved. And to think, especially on the government end, the private sector is different, to think that we could ever be in the same ballpark of what these folks can build and what they can put together is a bad assumption to make. So I think it's a turn around, let's bear hug this thing and do it the right way. Yeah, great point. And that's what made all this possible is you always knew that would make sense if we could consolidate and share resources and really share, honestly, the protections that a hardened data center provides that an independent organization simply can't match. That's true.
They can't do it. But there were lots of technical and cost roadblocks to that. Well, those roadblocks have been torn down. That's the reality is connectivity is widely available. It's ubiquitous. We got plenty. So you can't say that's a problem, right, anymore. And then the cost of this is really changed considerably. So, and I got to just say, full disclosure here, as you know, I've been working with ITS and Dr. Ogeron and his team when I was in business for a long time. And I've worked with states all over the country as a vendor to the public sector and state governments. And by far, the best experience right here in Mississippi. I've told other states, you ought to be looking at what we're doing here in Mississippi. We have a pretty dang good model. Now, I don't know if when they created CDPA back in 1970, that was a vision. They saw that coming, but it's worked out pretty well, I think.
I think so. I think too, when we talk about AI specifically, we talk about these paradigm shifts. These shifts that in a career you might see one if you're lucky, you might see two. This is an opportunity to think about what it is that we do differently.
Yeah.
Right? Because to be candid, any conversation that's rooted in yesterday, people have opinions. Don't take my stuff. Don't mess with how I do business. And I think it's a really smart play to both say, we really understand that, but especially with the governor, his team, and legislative leadership to say, but tomorrow could be different. And how do we take the things that we've done well and translate that into the next 10 or 15 years? I think that's a huge opportunity for us.
And you guys have got to think strategically like that, and you do. And you publish that strategy. I mean, you work directly with the agencies, and you help develop their long-term strategy for information technology and use of it.
I think so. I think sometimes to really be both empathetic but also transparent, I think sometimes the fear is not totally rational.
Yeah.
Right? So we were at the legislature last week talking about budget requests and needs, and so it was so interesting to me because about half the conversation was, efficiencies, KPIs, metrics, measurement. The other half was a version of hand-wringing. It was a version of, these shared things kind of worry me a little bit. And, I think you have to be sensitive to that. But when you get a crack at doing it from scratch. Try to get it as right as you can.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
a good point.
Yeah.
And but you guys do that, and I respect that. And of course, it's the herding cats when you got the wide range of agencies that all have their unique needs.
100%. But the way I think about it is, or my time at ITS has always been one of, there is no replacing the business expertise that is needed inside of an agency. And there is not a chance on the planet that ITS in Mississippi or any other central IT organization around the country could understand building roads, education, the environment, and you read on. No way.
Yeah.
I think where the conversation has been lacking is a very robust, where can we share things? And where can we share things in a way that make a difference?
Yeah.
That's the it's that straightforward.
Yeah,
it is that straightforward.
And I would say that that's really where the concept of consuming those workloads through a cloud delivery architecture applies, right?
Agreed. I think, too, that, because I've heard you give keynotes, and I've just sat there mesmerized, as you sort of do that. But I think it was the last one I heard you do of, these waves of technology. Mainframe computing was a platform, and it was a shared platform, not unlike the way we describe these other platforms that are shared. You've got this crazy middle period, which was sort of this LAN-based, open systems-based, where infrastructure proliferated. So the industry is just self-correcting that, right? Because the cloud is, strangely enough, not that I want to go back to wearing bell-bottom jeans and listening to Hall & Oates, but it's not unlike a mainframe. It's not
100%.
unlike a platform that we can all share and use. And what's the best way to do that?
That's 100% right.
Yeah.
And I've talked about that. Like, hey guys, this isn't anything new. IBM invented this back in the 70s. This idea of virtualization, which is what really allowed us to eliminate what we call server sprawl in our industry. Because, I got all these machines in here, and they're all dedicated to these different workloads and functions, but they're idle most of the time, and it's costing me money in terms of physical footprint and power and maintenance and everything else. And we fixed that really using a concept invented in the 70s on mainframes.
100%. Yeah. And the ability, so this came up yesterday in the conversation, right? So it's not just what you could do from a compute perspective. I think people forget, too, that these are technology stacks.
Exactly.
AI is going to live on top of some of those stacks, right?
Yep.
The computing power for AI or the inference power is going to sit on top of this other stack. There's really no way
Agree.
You can build that yourself and do it well.
Hang around. We got Craig Ogeron in the Element Well studio. He's the CIO for the state of Mississippi, Executive Director of the Department of Information Technology Services. You can hang around. We'll keep talking.
You bet.
Yeah.
Yep.
We're coming right back.
Interrupt this program. Gerard Gibert.
Here we go. This is huge. Huge news. Huge news. Huge. You need to listen to this.
Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
Right on cue there, a little Hall & Oates, right? So, one thing I wanted to clear up, we're talking to Dr. Craig Ogeron. He's the state's Chief Information Officer, Executive Director of the Information Technology Services Organization. So, you were talking about the 70s mainframes and I as well, that we're sort of returning to that. You remember, I think it was Sun Microsystems, Scott McNeely, who famously said, the network is the computer. I think I got that right.
It is.
And He was quite prescient on that, was he not?
Unbelievably so.
Because that's exactly where we are. You don't know. You just sort of plug in and compute, but there's a just massive amount of technology infrastructure behind the scenes.
But think about how bandwidth, as necessary as it is, like electricity, it's presumed to be there.
Yeah.
And it's presumed to be there in amounts that are more than you ever would need. That's part of that puzzle, right? Mm-hmm. Part of that puzzle is getting to and from places is just not really where we think of anymore. We don't think of it as a bottleneck. So, like we were talking, we talk about water consumption and power in this era, and I think there'll be unbelievable innovations in that space that'll continue to drive us forward.
And you know what? As well as people that invent these technologies that address that problem, that will spawn whole new industries, and there'll be a lot of people that will make a lot of money off of that, which is the way our capitalistic system works. But thank God, and literally thank God, he gave us noggins to solve these problems. I believe that the Creator expects us to do so, and just shutting it down as some want to and putting a moratorium on or put a pause, that's not the solution. The solution is, okay, well, if we have a problem with the power consumption and water consumption and other resources, let's fix that problem. And we can. And you're right. I think we're going to see innovation that's not even a twinkle in the eye today.
Agreed.
That will address this.
Agree. I think you'll see tons of innovation on the energy space. I think inside of data centers, there'll be tremendous innovation on cooling technologies or chips that just run cooler. What you want to do is be able to maximize that space that's being utilized, right? And from an infrastructure perspective, and I think you're going to see it. It's so interesting sometimes, the chicken and the egg on the innovation front, right? So in November of 22, ChatGPT comes out, this AI renaissance happens. It creates a lot of angst with opportunity, but the angst is a driver. The angst is sort of this impetus to innovate, right, in ways that without the driver, you would never get there.
100%.
And I think so.
Totally agree. And you and I that have been around the industry for a while, we've watched these cycles the entire time.
Sure.
It's the way it's been. And it's always kind of one comes out, okay, that solves that problem, and then something finds another one, but we're advancing the whole time as part of that.
I love the conversation now with AI and sort of this use case conversation. So these models are getting so competitive, right? They're competing with each other to produce so much better inference-based replies that we're getting. But I have a memory of early in the internet days when you would talk to folks and they would say, boy, I need a big pipe. And we'd go, good point. What are we going to do with it? Boy, I just need a big pipe. And that's in some ways where AI is, which is that it's amazing technology. Now it's going to get to what do we do with it? How do we make it useful? How does it change business? How does it drive, economic prosperity? I have described the phase we're in right now, Craig, is we're actually not in the infancy stage. We're in the embryonic stage. We hadn't gotten to be an infant yet. Agreed.
And I know most people think of AI as the GPT, as generational AI. You give it a prompt and it returns something. That's not where the real power and value of this technology is. No, I don't think so. I think so. From an AI space, we typically think of 4 buckets. One is democratization, right? That it's going to be in the hands of your team, of your company, right? It's going to be in your hands. It's augmentative. It augments. It doesn't automate. That's a big difference. The third, in terms of success, I think is change fitness, which is how do you metabolize change? And data is the fourth one. One way at a cocktail party to get people to immediately not want to talk to you is to pivot to, let's talk about data. And they put their drink down and wander away. But data is an amazing topic in 2026. It is an amazing topic to think about, because we're talking about the internet, right, which made available this amount of data, which is key to training these models to be able to do what they're going to do. And so I think that data as a strategic asset
will become even more of a conversational kind of point when the companies really ingest what are the use cases, right? How am I going to use these tools? At that point, your data house has to be in order, or you will not get very far down the road.
Man, and that's happening right now. You know this at warp speed.
Oh, for sure.
At absolute warp speed. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things Jensen Wang talked about in his interview on the Business Network this morning. Says they're overloaded with orders, that's exceeding all their expectations. And he just doesn't see any slowdown because we really haven't gotten to the point where we're fully optimizing the power of the technology at this point.
Agree totally.
But we're getting there.
Well, I agree totally.
We will.
And I think, you start looking at one of the challenges, or we sort of frame it as, how difficult it is to see around corners.
Yeah.
And the people that do are just, they're unbelievable to me.
Totally.
How they can sort of, that, what is it, skate to where the puck's going to be kind of idea. There is going to be a lot of that, and I think it's going to be an amazing time to watch it and to sort of live with it and through it.
Agree.
Yeah.
So talk to us some about the AI task force that you and I are members of, and we made it clear from the get-go we don't want to regulate to the point where it impairs innovation, and we just completed, I think, our last meeting before we submit a report of recommendations to the legislature. Talk about that.
Well, part of what we ended up submitting, through what the legislature set up in the last session was Governor Reeves' Executive Order 1584. So we did a complete inventory of government, right? So how are agencies contemplating the use of some of these tools? One of the things I'm most proud of that ITS and the team did was sort of produce this acceptable use policy, kind of an initial one. And while it didn't really have inside of it a Bill of Rights, which is getting talked about, it had principles, right? So it had a lot of principles that relates to AI. And I think I'm really proud of that work over the last year, which our team put, respectfully put forth as to be part of this report that gets memorialized, as we sort of enter into this next year of where is this going and how can we, through this task force, do all the right things in the state of Mississippi.
We got to brag a little bit because what your team's been doing is phenomenal along the lines of the AUP and other guidance. Mm-hmm. The task force, our legislature had the forethought to put together, and then what Colin Napier's doing with Maine.
Yeah.
Mississippi is out front here.
So let me tell you about Dr. Napier. When I go around the country as the state CIO, I always talk about Maine. And I talk about it because it has been a rarity in my career, right? It's been a rarity where this kind of consortia exists, and the consortia is about momentum. I can't tell you how valuable that is to be able to move the ball forward.
Yeah.
I consider it one of the key elements, right? So we've hosted multiple sort of learning workshops with agencies, and Dr. Napier and his team has helped us fill the room. That is huge for the state of Mississippi.
Agree.
Right? It's not just a government thing. It is huge for the state of Mississippi as we embrace the economic development that the governor and his team has put out there, and aspiring to be that next version of our best selves.
No doubt about it.
For sure.
It's making us stand out. Mississippi Artificial Intelligence Network, folks, is what MAIN, the acronym, stands for. Dr. Colin Napier for Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College that leads that, heads that. Mm-hmm. Like you, he's tremendously well-versed on the technology, and I think this is going to drive Mississippi forward. It is going to be a factor in our economic development.
No question.
Man, it's exciting. So,
yes, sir.
It's something that Mississippi, among many other things, can poke its chest out about and boast.
I would agree.
Yeah. Well, I just want the folks to know what a pleasure it was through the years working with you guys and your team. It's top notch, and I've told other states that as well, man.
Thank you.
And appreciate you coming in.
Yeah,
we got to do this some more and have these discussions.
We'll do. Thank you much.
Dr. Craig Ogeron, Executive Director, Mississippi ITS, and the CIO for the state of Mississippi. We're coming right back with half an hour of midday. Stay with us.
From the Seabrook.com.
Middays with Gerard.
Good for America. Good for fans of justice and truth. Good for us.
SuperTalk Mississippi.
This is what we stand for.
That would be Cream bumping us into this segment. That was 67, 66, somewhere around that time frame.
They were the cream of the crop.
Yeah, man. Good stuff. Appreciate that, Will. So, enjoyed that conversation. Yeah, full disclosure, worked with Craig a lot in his role as the CIO and executive director of ITS. They have a great team. They do really great work for the state of Mississippi. It truly is a bright spot in the IT infrastructure, the IT environment in the state agency complex. And, you know, I'll just point out again something I've talked about on the program many times. We've seen a lot of attention now, Will, being paid to fraud, right? The misuse, abuse of government programs and the General Accounting Office. Not too long ago, kind of ran an undercover operation on the various federal programs, financial aid programs, if you will, financial assistance. SNAP would be one of those, the food stamps program, Medicaid, another one. And they threw some applications and information at those programs just to see how well they handled various situations, and they didn't fare very well. So now there are reports that indicate that there are systems that have Social Security numbers entered multiple times, fake Social Security numbers, false Social Security numbers, dead people, etc., like we were talking about the other day, and just an assortment of ways that spending could be misused, misdirected, that fraud could easily be perpetrated on these systems. And it's just mind-boggling to me that the systems are that bad, because it's not a problem in that we need more laws. It's another situation. Well, like we said yesterday, we don't allow payment of benefits to dead people. We certainly don't allow people to sign up multiple times for the same benefit in multiple states, such as Medicaid. We don't permit that. That's we don't need more laws for that, and we don't need more people, because the people are only as good as the tools they have access to prevent those circumstances. We need better systems, bad. And you run in the IT world, you run into a lot of pride and ownership. We used to call them their fiefdoms. And people just won't let you in. They have total control and scope of purview over these systems environments, and they won't let people in. And so the systems are problematic, but they won't allow third parties to come in and fix them. What we should do, including in the state of Mississippi, in my view, is we should do a thorough review of all these systems to ensure that all the various use cases of where fraud could occur and be allowed to seep through and benefits are wrongly paid, there should be a thorough review of every one of those systems. Medicaid's the biggest one, of course. And then the SNAP program is another big one. You know about the TANF program. Lord knows that's gotten a lot of attention the last 3 or 4 years in the state. And these are federal programs that are administered at the state level, is the way it works. And it's amazing to me that there are no standard systems for that purpose that all the states can use. Now, there are some widely used systems that multiple states use, but the fact that the GAO could sign up for SNAP benefits. I think one of them was the same Social Security number 125 times. I just can't even comprehend how the system would allow that to happen. It's incomprehensible.
After that 83rd time, there'd be like, hey, wait a minute.
It's incredible. And there's a long list of the other cases, if you will, that they entered into the system, did the GAO, and came out with a report that said, yeah, we found all these holes in the systems that easily facilitates fraud. And a lot of that fraud, by the way, committed by foreigners that get access to our systems. Yeah. Our IRS tax processing systems. Every year, the earned income tax credit, which is essentially you file a tax return, you don't make enough money to owe taxes, and the government sends you money back. It's the ultimate form of redistribution. And what you'll have is all these Social Security numbers floating around through all the breaches through the years. And the bad guys, mainly foreign organizations, will file tax returns. They'll fabricate information and submit that to the IRS. And the IRS's systems are so bad, they'll send refunds out. Last year, it was estimated to be $8 billion of earned income tax credit fraud. And so what happens is then when the legitimate taxpayer files their tax return, the IRS says, well, I already got a tax return with your Social Security number. Well, I haven't filed it yet. You see what I mean? And this is crazy that our systems are so poor in design and lack these sorts of controls. This is software development 101.
And the price to upgrade all that stuff, you would think you would save.
You would. Easy. But again, it's the fiefdoms. Man, they don't want third parties because that's the only way you're going to get it done. Just like Dr. Ogeron was saying, we can't possibly know everything there is to know about the subject matter of those businesses, but we do have lots of partners and vendors, and that's what they do, right? They sit in the middle. They're not by the way, just so you guys will know, they don't create all these systems. They oversee the procurement and implementation of them in accordance with state standards. That's what ITS does primarily. That's a big function of the agency is procurement, and they're really good at it, by the way. I'm telling you, they're really good at it, and that's coming from a vendor who won and lost, all competitively bid, unlike so much other stuff in our state. They do a fantastic job of administering that, and these third parties that are highly capable organizations build these systems. For the agencies, right? But there's a lot of protection of those turfs. You heard him talk about trying to move from the premise environment to the cloud environment, which would be much more efficient for the state, the agencies, and the taxpayers. And they get pushback on that. It's just human nature to a great extent. But this is the way to solve the fraud. The point I'm making, the main takeaway, the way to solve all the abuse of our public money of taxpayer dollars is to modernize our information technology systems and to leverage new technologies such as video surveillance and artificial intelligence, even drone technology to root out abuse and fraud and waste. That's how you do it. Not more laws, not more people. Lord, not more people. That costs money. We should have video surveillance at every point in the state of Mississippi where the public interacts with a public sector entity at the city, municipal, county, school district, state level, where there's cash involved in a transaction. There's an exchange of cash because that's where a lot of this embezzlement comes from and just theft of taxpayer dollars. Why don't we have video surveillance? We don't. We should make that a law to require video. Every bank in America has that, right? Every single teller.
Go to Kroger.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You do the self-checkout thing at Kroger. If you have two items in your hand and you pass by and let's say you go to the left and then you go to the right and you scan it, it'll flag you.
Yes, exactly. We have an array of technology to prevent all this abuse by, in this case, the employees of the organization handling the money, handling the cash. We have tons of that. Why are we using that? The private sector had to figure it out or they go broke. But in the public sector, we don't. And then we wait for the auditor to show up. And then 2 months after they do an audit, they'll discover something. That's only what they're catching. That's not everything they don't catch because it's not perfect. And then we try to recover it from people who don't have any money. We should be preventing it. The state audit department in Mississippi, the goal should be to make it look like the Maytag repairman. They're so bored, they got nothing to do other than just the routine audit work, right? But all these embezzlement schemes that get discovered as part of the audit and financial abuse, misuse, just theft, fraud, etc. Again, we should be thinking more about prevention, not just detection and then attempt to recovery. I'd like to see the legislature take a hard look at that. That's my soapbox for today on how we could utilize technology to ensure that government does not leak taxpayer money. That's what we ought to be working towards. But when you see the GAO come out and say, yeah, we signed up the same Social Security number 125 times, in the ACA marketplaces, the Affordable Care Act, the so-called Obamacare, of the 24 million that are signed up, it's now been reported and revealed that 12 million last year that had coverage never filed a claim. They don't even know they have it. Brokers, unscrupulous brokers, sign them up without their knowledge because they can get zero-cost premiums, so they never get a bill. That's crazy. Coming right back with a final segment on Midday. Stay with us.
At Key Construction,
covering the stories that matter most to Mississippians. Gerard Gibert. Middays with Gerard. SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Middays. Little Fleetwood Mac. The late, great Christine McVie on the lead vocals there. So, yeah, just looking again through that information, the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, in December 2025, just last month, provided significant evidence of enrollment fraud in Obamacare that suggests that fake accounts were created. They were able to enroll 20 non-existent identities in the Obamacare program using Social Security numbers that had never been issued and other easily created counterfeit documents. Of the 20 false enrollments, 18 were still active in September 25, costing taxpayers more than $10,000 a month. So 26,000 accounts investigators found received subsidies in 23 based on Social Security numbers that match records in the Social Security Administration's death file that we were talking about yesterday with Senator Kennedy introducing a bill that prohibits the federal government from paying benefits to dead people. It's just mind-boggling. We have to do that. So, incredible. Mose makes a point. He says, yeah, you know, a simple desire of the database would identify multiple users of Social Security numbers. I mean, Mose, this is just, again, this is software architecture development 101 where you've got primary keys that cannot be replicated and the database itself won't allow it. So I don't know what they're doing in the design of these systems. Now, you typically will have multiple keys. And then when you get into these sophisticated structured query language environments like Oracle, Microsoft SQL, and so forth, which are all tabular, it gets really complicated with respect to the schema and stuff. But it's not that hard to make sure that a primary piece of information, the main identifying piece of information, in this case a Social Security number, cannot exist more than once in the system. That's just straightforward software coding, actually design 101. So really incredible. that that's even going on. Mike in Collinsville says, years ago I went to file our tax returns. I was notified that my wife had already filed a return. We found out that someone had stolen her identity, filed a fraudulent return to receive a refund. What shocks me about this, even if someone used her identity to file a return, how did they open an account for direct deposit, or how did they cash the check? Did they have proper ID? Seems like we could find these people by following the money trail. Of course, I've never read where our government has shut down these fraudsters. They haven't. And again, all good point, Mike, because bad systems allow it to occur. There should be a series of checks. Again, I would recommend this is where you could use artificial intelligence in to favor of the taxpayers, to benefit the taxpayers, to make sure, that's a legitimate Social Security number that's coming from the actual holder of the Social Security number, and there would be some checks on that and some controls on that. And the same thing with opening up an account. So I'm not sure what all they did to get around all that, but it's not robust enough. I'll just put it that way. It desperately needs upgrading. And then B.J. Knupp in Itawamba County said, did the state not the last few years recently try to update computer systems and fail because the vendor did not do the upgrades, the scope of work that was bid? The only situation I'm aware of right now in the state government that I've just heard from folks at ITS and just within state government, there's some controversy at Department of Human Services with a big contract, big project going on, being delivered by a third party. And look, it's not unusual, Will, to have these scope conflicts. That happens all the time, and hopefully that will get resolved. But I'm not aware of anything failing. But the big point is the state doesn't really have one big central computer like Dr. Ogeron was talking about earlier. All the agencies have their own environments. You may recall he mentioned LAN, so that stands for Local Area Network, for those of you that don't know. And so, each one of those agencies, they actually procure and, for the most part, manage and administer their own IT environments. And so what he was saying, that I totally agree with, the infrastructure layer of that should migrate to cloud architectures. And there's a number of great cloud companies like AWS here in Mississippi that they could move those workloads to, but they tend to push back on that. Their software, AWS's infrastructure is the way that works, but you get the benefit of their hardened data center environment. They only sell about $100 billion a year of those services. It works, right? We've come to a close today, though. Tomorrow I will be speaking at the Biloxi Businessmen's Club back on a Friday. Until then, stay safe and God bless everyone.
A SuperTalk Mississippi Media production.